Welcome back to the Real Personal Branding Podcast. I'm Lauren B. Davis, and I am excited to bring you these inspiring conversations with guests who share the real stuff. Personal stories, insights, celebrations, and sometimes we even share the chaos that it took to build their authentic and powerful business. I hope this episode will help you craft a more aligned relationship between you and your business and your life. If you seem interested in that, this episode is going to be for you. My guest today is Girard, and Laura and I's conversation, you're going to hear this. It was kind of more like you were listening to us have a meaningful chat on the phone. You're kind of hearing what we would probably talk about in a more intimate, close conversation. And I first found Laura online and genuinely liked her content, but she talks about movement and body love in a way that I don't see very often. That kind of work really means a lot to me. But as I started seeing her content more, I realized that she was just pretty brilliant. She was growing. She was obviously clearly building an online business, but she wasn't afraid to essentially drop the curtain and really share the real things that she was navigating through in life too. And sometimes I see like influencers online who I can feel that they're very guarded and disingenuous. Maybe like their content is meant to look perfect on purpose. I think you probably know what I'm talking about. They don't share their flaws or weaknesses. Don't share your food. Don't share what you're struggling with. Don't share too many selfies. We're all inundated with these fake, weird rules that are all made up. And Laura's content stood out to me because she is a person who is just being fully alive and fully herself online. And I super appreciate that. I thought it was beautiful. I wanted to share this interview with all of you. So in this episode, you're going to hear more about Laura's real business journey, how she creates the space to show up as her most authentic self online, and what she does to find ease and balance in her personal and her professional life. We are not talking biohacks or gimmicks or diets, but instead we consider all of the ways that having an online business can both improve and throw some chaos, good, exciting, and sometimes scary into your life. And at the end of this episode, you're still going to put down your earbuds and you'll have practical lessons you can apply. So if you hear something you like on this podcast, just let me know. I'm really curious. I would love a text, a DM, an email, a share. You can find me practically everywhere as L Davis Creative if we're not connected already. And sharing this podcast with someone you know is a huge bonus to me. Podcasts like mine grow with people like you. So if you know someone who would like this podcast, would you please share it with them? That really would mean a lot to me. Every time you do this, it makes me do a little happy dance. Okay, get ready for insights, tips, real world examples from Girard. I'm going to read you her official bio and then we'll get right into it. How do you make a business that makes you money but also truly makes you happy? Let's find out. My guest today is Girard. Laura is a multi-certified personal trainer, co-host of the Fit Literate podcast, and founder of the Energy Academy, a global virtual fitness studio where she's helped over 200 people keep their bodies moving since March of 2020. And we all know what was happening in March of 2020. She is passionate about harnessing the connective power of social media to create community and start conversations about growth, self-compassion, and the messy business of babysitting yourself. I hope you enjoy this episode. Welcome to the Real Personal Branding Podcast. I'm so happy that you're here, Laura.
I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Okay, what I find really interesting about you and your content is that you don't necessarily talk about how to get a summer body. I feel like your content is very comforting to me because I've really pared down over the years the way that chaos in my life shows up, and like especially with running a business, trying to keep myself healthy, trying to like work through all of the different things that life throws your way, especially like personal life things too. And so I think that for some reason, I don't even know how I came across your content the first time, but I think somebody recommended you to me, and I went and checked out your stuff and I was just like, oh my gosh, this is like a real person. And I think the thing that I love about it is from a business owner's perspective, I'm like, I love looking at how other people are running their businesses and how other people are sharing their businesses with the world. But then from a deeply personal level, I'm looking at your content like, wow, this is exactly what I needed to read or see or feel or hear at this time, because your content is about fitness and your content is about living a healthier life, but it's not telling me how to like get shredded abs for summer so I can wear a bikini. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I love that that's what you've taken away. It's always refreshing to have that reflected back at you and be like, okay, it's getting across. I'm on the right track.
Oh,
yeah.
Absolutely, 100%. So the first question I always ask is on the Real Personal Branding podcast, because we're talking about the real you behind the brand, is how are you doing for real?
Oh, well, that's a heavy one. It's where New York, I'm located in Manhattan. I'll start with that. And it's been a scary couple days in New York. When we're recording this, we've had the worst air quality on the planet because there are wildfires happening in Canada because climate change. And so it's been a weird couple days, especially work-wise, and feeling like I need to hole up in my apartment a little bit. But other than that, I'm doing okay. And I turn 28 tomorrow. And so aging is such a massive privilege. So hopefully thank you so much. Hopefully we'll get some blue skies and it'll be a good day to end a kind of weird week. Yeah. How are you?
It's June right now. So when we're recording this, so if you need a refresher, just look back on what was happening at the beginning of June in New York. It's pretty
sorry, scary. I've already dated this podcast.
Yeah, no, that's okay.
It's on everybody's minds.
No, it is on everyone's mind. I've been looking at the news a lot. I'm doing good. Thank you for asking.
Yeah.
Nobody usually asks that back. I'm doing really great. I'm excited because I'm in the process of relaunching this podcast, and I've been doing interview after interview, like recording the last couple of weeks, and I just have some amazingly brilliant guests coming on, including you, and it's exciting because I loved my show before. It was really special to me before. I shut it down for some personal stuff for a little bit of time, and like the rebirth of it just feels like so much more meaningful to me than it probably is to anybody else.
Amazing.
But it's so special. So
like
thank you for
Aphrodite emerging from the ocean. I love it.
It really feels like that. It really feels like that. So you talk about creating movement for yourself that aligns with you and creating balance kind of in the chaos of life. And that kind of concept fits right into the show of creating this real authenticity and balance and personal relationships and business. Can you walk me through kind of the journey of how you started your business? Did you always feel this balance? Like, what was the journey from point A to point B where you are now?
Wow, I definitely did not feel balanced when I started my business. For, again, not to put such a timestamp on this, but I started my business March 13th, 2020. Oh. Basically, so I started my business from a deep place of fear.
Yeah.
Going, okay, my life has shut down. At the time, I was actively pursuing a performance career in musical theater. And I had started I'd been working at a gym for about 2 years, and I had become a certified personal trainer in that process because I was like, I'm definitely underqualified to be working at this gym. They shouldn't be letting me do this because that's how my brain works. So I went and got myself certified, and I was looking at, I had found a real true passion for training people, for feeling like I was making more of an immediate positive impact on people's days and their lives than I was experiencing through being, a non-working actor. In your wildest dreams as an actor, do you get to meet someone who's maybe been affected by something you did on stage and that meant something to them? But working with people one-on-one in real life, or even in a group class setting, it was that immediate feedback of you just put a smile on someone's face, or you let them know that they're going to be okay. You made something that was scary and hard less intimidating. And that feeling of helping was really intoxicating. That's what drew me into the business that I'm in. So March 2020, my life has shut down. I'm like, oh, shoot, how am I going to pay my Manhattan rent? Yeah. And I had been wanting to experiment with doing something online, doing some sort of group fitness, not even challenge, but like, hey, I kind of disagree with the way things are run at my gym. I feel like people are reaching out for a different kind of fitness, a different kind of support. And I feel like that's something I can offer. And I never would have had the fire under my ass to actually put something in motion had it not been out of necessity. And so the past few years, if I have to like pick an overarching theme, it's been moving from a place of urgency and fear and necessity into a place of like sustainability. And it sounds woo woo, but like love, trying to figure out how, if I want this to be my path, if I want to keep going with this, running on like adrenaline alone is not going to work out. So even though I've gotten very lucky in business, and I'll never forget the first day, like all my little Venmo notifications beeped in and I realized that I was going to be able to pay my Manhattan rent just based off something I had created with my own two hands and my one smooth brain.
Oh,
like that
gosh.
was the best feeling in the world, you know?
Yeah.
But moving from that initial, like, okay, we can do something and it's working, to it is working. I've gotten very lucky. Not a lot of people are able to start a business with nothing and run it and support themselves. I know that a lot of privilege and a lot of luck and a lot of hard work, but mostly a lot of luck has gone into that. So not looking too deeply at like, oh, this is working, but it might not work anymore. Just accepting that it's working and being like, how do I fit this into the kind of life that I want to live and not just be a servant to this thing that's completely out of my control. And I'm just really only at the beginning of figuring that out, I fear. But it's exciting.
Do you feel like there was a moment within there, or like a story that you can tell us where you really had that growth moment where you're like, oh, it might not be growth like financially or something like that, but just like that moment where you're like, oh, this is something I just learned the hard way, and or like in an exciting way, or even in just like a slow burn way, that you were like, okay, this is a very big growing moment for me, and how you grew from it?
I think something that's still fresh that I'm figuring out is, now that I have to get back into interacting with the real world as someone who has a business that people know about, as someone who operates as a brand, hearing my friends or people close to me or people who I'm not that close to, but have been watching me in a way that I didn't know that they were, hearing them describe and articulate who I am and what I do has been, it's really revealed to me a lot of my own like confidence deficiencies, that when I was just starting 3.5 years ago and I had nothing and I had no idea what I was doing, I was a lot bolder. I was a lot more fearless. I was a lot more willing to take a leap of faith and put myself out there and do something embarrassing. And now I'm realizing I've gotten myself into bigger rooms. I've gotten myself in front of more important eyes. I have something that I can point to and be like, I did that, you know, with the support of a huge community, but I built that community. And I'm having trouble saying like, I own a global fitness brand. I am the founder of this virtual fitness studio. Like, I have no elevator pitch. And I've only realized that when I've sort of been in a place where I had to pitch myself and been like, well, shit, I don't know how to articulate what it is that I do, because it feels like this giant behemoth I've created that is everything to me. It's all consuming, but how do I break that down into a sentence? And I think ultimately it comes down to capturing a little bit of that, well, I don't know what I'm doing, so it doesn't even matter, energy and confidence.
Yeah.
But now I do have something to lose. Now I do have something to, you know, measure myself against. So I'm figuring that out right now.
I think, no, that's such a good point. I think that everyone goes through that, where the version of you that somebody else knew before something happened in your life, something big, right? the version in that of you that somebody knew before that happened is a different version of you. It's the same you, but it's like you with different things and different ideas and a different business and a different life. And some people will understand it without you even having to articulate it, and some people won't and will need a lot more breaking down. Some people will leave you behind, or you'll leave them behind. Some people will kind of like cheer you on the whole way. And then also on top of that, being able to describe what you do when you feel like maybe you didn't know that it could ever be what it is today. I think that's such a normal feeling. And I think that people feel like when they have that feeling, like it's like no one else has ever been there, right? Like nobody.
Yes.
Like
it's very isolating and it's uncomfortable because growth is uncomfortable. And that's the sort of thing that like we say it over and over and we know it intellectually, but it's really hard to kind of metabolize that knowledge. And also it's challenging when you're the one steering the ship and you're also directing the ship and you're also like swabbing the decks on the ship and performing in the show on the ship. It's difficult to have I think it does still come down to confidence, which is something I'm still working on, but to say like, no, this is a real thing. Like this is not just important to me. This is something like tactile that I've made. And I am a business person. I am a CEO or a founder or whatever it is. And I think like, I won't divert the conversation too much in this direction, but I think especially as women, I know I have a really wonderful, supportive, lovely friend group, but you also look around and these major milestones are happening in your life, things that you've worked so hard for and that people won't necessarily understand because they're not on the inside of it. And you see people getting engaged and married and pregnant and all these things that people seem to be able to conceptualize more as milestone markers. And I think that often makes at least me sort of second guess my growth as something meaningful.
Oh my gosh, this is just such a relevant conversation. It's so true. It's 100% true. There's been so many times that I have asked myself if in my friend Snapchat where they're sharing their my friend group Snapchat where they're all sharing their milestones of their kids growing up and stuff, if I should be like, hey, I was on this really amazing podcast with the author of this best-selling book, last week, and show them that like as if it's the same as their kids. I've second guessed myself too. Like, does this matter, in that way? But yeah, it does matter. And also my friends have never told me that it doesn't matter. That's also a story that I told myself. And yeah, there are friends that maybe the reason why you say that to yourself is because you are, and the reason I've said it to myself is because other people in my life, I've run myself through a filter of what they think. And so I have to ask myself continually, like, what filter am I actually hearing that through?
Yeah. Sometimes it is just projecting. Sometimes it's just something we made up. Like, I think people are so willing to celebrate you, but they have to know that it's something important to you. Yeah. And there's something in our brains that like, if it's just something good, if it's something that it feels like we kind of tricked our way into or we got lucky about, then we don't want to share it because it just feels like bragging. It's much easier to share like, oh, I'm working so hard and I'm so busy, because that feels like there's a connotation of importance, but there's also a connotation of self-sacrifice and service, which obviously like I believe deeply in service. I find a lot of personal fulfillment and meaning in like working in a helping industry.
Me too.
But also I feel like I tend to edge on playing like the martyr card to prove how important something is to me, rather than being like, this cool thing fell out of the sky and happened to me. And I'd like to celebrate that with everybody, please. It's like, oh, I'm so busy. That's a shift I've made in the past couple months where I'm I want to, always share the reality of it, that I didn't like manifest and girl boss my way into, 700 figures or whatever people want to believe, right? We've all gotten those DMs. Like,
yeah.
you want to share the reality. You want to say, hey, I haven't showered in 48 hours and I'm like sitting pantsless on my couch, sending out cold emails. Like you want people to know that that's part of the reality.
Yeah.
But I've really tried hard to not lean on busyness to prove that the work I'm doing is important to me or important, period. Like, I don't think anyone expects us to be working 12-hour days, but in my brain, that's the only way I can prove that it's like worthwhile.
Right. No, I understand this so much more. Like, we could do an entire podcast episode about this subject. I asked my therapist about that. I was like, why? I talk too much about therapy on this podcast, but therapy is a wonderful thing.
We should be talking about therapy more. Bring it.
I asked my therapist about that. I was like, why do I feel like I can't share these things? Because specifically, I have freaking amazing friends who are so supportive of me. And there's a couple of reasons. There's a couple very strong characters in my life who made sure that I didn't feel like those things were important. Mm-hmm. And I had to prove the importance of them or figure out some massive achievement to share in order for it to actually be worth celebrating. Or it felt like all I ever talk about, or they would make sure I felt like all I ever talk about is work or something like that. When I was like, well, I have to like you said, I have to scrub the deck and perform and run the ship and manage the rest of the team. And it felt like, well, but this is my life and everyone else gets to vent about work and I want to do that too. And, there's a lot of like filters, like I was saying, that we run it through. But I asked my therapist, why is it that I don't feel like I can talk about it? And we came around to this idea that I only feel like it's worth talking about if it's an achievement. Not necessarily like the day-to-day, like this is what I'm doing or this is what's going on in my life, where friends of mine will do that. And I love hearing about what's going on in their day. And in fact, I'll sometimes ask my friends, like, tell me something boring. Like, I want to know something boring going on in your day. And so I've tried to start asking myself, like, what is something boring I can tell my friends about what I'm doing right now that does not have anything to do with my achievements? And nothing to do with anything I need to prove that I've done that is so special. Just like some boring ass piece of my day. And trying that has actually been really helpful to me within this whole, I don't know how we got here, but this is.
No, I think that's so important too. Like, especially I don't know anyone who runs a business where they're not just online most of the day.
Yeah.
But I feel like I have in the past couple of months really been leaning on my friendships hard and really trying to remember that people who know me online don't know me, even if they're praising me, right. Even if they're happy with me, even if they don't have any misconceptions about me. That's just not what the internet is for.
They don't know the full version of you. Yeah.
Yeah. And there is a different kind of intimacy that you have with the people who are really in your life. And those two experiences can't replace each other. And I feel like that personal intimacy is just built from the mundane moments. It's built from running errands together or coming over at the end of the day and you're too tired to talk, or you just happen to be there when something happens. It's not coming together to celebrate always. It's just being there.
Yeah.
And I think if you don't make time to prioritize that as much as you can, even if it's just, a phone call every once in a while, then you do start to lean on people on the internet giving you positive reinforcement, because that's the closest thing you have to like a job review to know that you're doing a good job steering the ship.
Yes.
But that also starts to make your personhood blend into your business, which we're always in danger of when you are a brand of one. So just like making that time to feel human is I honestly think the only thing that's kept me from like hopping in front of a bus, being honest, no matter how much I love my work, you can't be,
Yeah,
you can't be a business all the time.
you
You
can't.
just can't.
You absolutely can't. And I think that is something that, whether or not it's intentional, it shines through even in your content, is that you do make time. It seems that you make time for things that like the general public doesn't see, which is what I suggest for people. When I say you're building a personal brand online for clients, I'm not saying like you share every single piece of your life. You don't need to self-sacrifice or bring people into pieces of your life that you don't feel comfortable with. And something that speaks to your personal brand is that you talk about fitness, but you also kind of bring us in on the journey of your life. So we know about and love your cat. we get to see your fun weekends and little 15-second reels. And I think it talks to me about how you can bring someone on the journey with you and give them some ownership in your presence there and in knowing that you're there, but you can still create a deeply impactful business and a life within yourself. And I would love to know like some of the ways that you've kind of started to create that balance for yourself as a personal brand and someone who people do know, they do recognize that you do have validation and support online. How do you kind of manage all of that?
I think I'm doing a better job recently. I think I've always been an oversharer. So I think this is actually something that I think my inclusion of my personal life is actually something that I've pulled back a lot on, even though I'm the person getting on Instagram, like snot pouring out of my nose, actively crying, but that kind of stuff. I'm trying to figure out a way to say this that doesn't sound so completely Machiavellian, but nobody gets the full story, right? And
Right.
I've become much more discerning about not what story I want to share, but in which ways I want to make myself available.
Mm-hmm.
I'm never not telling the truth, but there are things like I'm not posting where I am when I'm there. Like I'll
Right.
post my weekend reels, but it's usually about 2 weeks after it happened because
Yeah.
I realized it was more fun to spend my weekends and be the person with my phone out if I didn't have the pressure to spend an hour editing that reel to post it that night.
Right.
That's the kind of thing that takes away from your life.
Yeah.
So figuring out how I want to keep those boundaries with myself in terms of being someone who is making content about my life. I started sharing on social media in a quote unquote meaningful way / it wasn't even business yet. Like when I started my business, I was posting about, hey, this is what I'm doing on Instagram so that my friends and family knew. And that's how I got clients. But I wasn't posting with the intention of like being a content creator. It was just to support my business. But my mom passed away in August of 2020 after a pretty long battle with cancer. And
Sorry.
thank you. Social media was the easiest way to update everyone. It was the easiest way to put out a missile of here's how I am and here's what I'm doing and here's what you need to know without having to take on, let me go through my Rolodex and let me text everyone who needs to know this and let me get 1,000. I'm here if you need anything, text that like nobody's going to follow up on, because when you're the person grieving, you shouldn't have to have the onus shouldn't be on you to reach out and be like, hey, here's a list of chores. Can you do this for me? Like,
Right.
again, intimacy is just people being there. And I mean, August 2020 was the summer of 2020 was a bizarre time for everyone. I'm not saying it was a healthy behavior, but as a person who really does struggle to ask for help, to just be able to open my phone and feel like I was kind of journaling and not like I was talking to anybody, but that I was just being honest in a way that I was craving, being isolated, feeling like I didn't really have a creative outlet, like just being like, this is the reality of what I'm experiencing right now, was such a lifesaver to me. And at a time when I was, quarantined away from my entire support system, it helped to think that I could kind of update people about how I was in the moment without waiting for the filter of, oh, we scheduled a phone call and now I'm doing fine. And I don't want to open up that bucket of worm. You know how when you have therapy on like a good day and you're like, well,
Oh,
no,
that's
I
the
don't want to
worst.
talk. Like, I don't want to talk about the bad stuff because I'm just going to put myself in a bad mood. Like,
Yes, I know exactly that feeling.
and, I've stepped away from like, I have taken a step back from like openly crying on Instagram and being like, this is what sucks. But I also remember getting floods of DMs from people who had experienced major loss, some of whom were super close to me and I didn't know about it. People who had lost like their best friends who were in their early 20s and just hadn't told anyone because they didn't know how to like transfigure that grief into something that was appropriate to share. And I think that's kind of what broke the seal for me on being like, why do we have these fucking rules about what's appropriate to share? We are going through a massive trauma together in the, beginning of the pandemic. We are all experiencing loss and grief and bad days on the regular. And so we can bemoan how Instagram is a highlight reel, but we're all contributing to that. And that doesn't mean that, you need to get on Instagram and cry about your dead mom. I love you, Nancy. I miss you. Sorry, I'm using you for content right now. She'd love it. She doesn't care.
Hi, Nancy.
Yeah. That doesn't mean we need to take it to that extreme. And again, I've certainly walked it back. But like, if I have a bad day, I'm going to say it. I'm not just going to not show up, because I do think that if I have a bad day and I can't pull myself out of it, I'm going to get on Instagram and I'm going to scroll and I'm probably going to make myself feel worse. And if somebody else is like, LOL, I got laid off today, that's life, I'm like, yeah, that is life. Like that's how it happened. As someone who runs a fitness business where people show up for me every day, people in my community, on my team, my clients, they show up on good days and on bad days, and they do something super vulnerable and scary, which is moving your body, whether we want to admit it or not. It's a horrifying thing to do around other people, right? Mm-hmm. That's like a big act of faith and honesty and trust to like move with anyone else. Mm-hmm. People show up on their good days and their bad days. And whether they're having a good day or a bad day, that's in the room with us. And that's living in their body, just like the workout's about to. And I want them to know that they don't have to come into the room with me and put on a fake happy face and grit through their workout that's supposed to be self-care, that's supposed to be recharging for them, that's supposed to feel like something where you can choose whether you want to work through what you're experiencing or you want to put the world down and just forget about it and take care of yourself for a minute. But whatever you're experiencing in the like horrifying, messy experience of being a person with a human body, like that's welcome in the room with us. And not everybody has to be feeling that way, and you don't have to share, but whatever it is, it's okay. That's just what life is. It's like very friendly nihilism where it's like, yeah, the world is burning and we're going to still do our bicep curls because, yeah, the only thing that's certain is entropy and we're all going to die. But while we're still here, let's make picking up the groceries a little bit easier, and maybe let's like laugh a little bit.
I love it. With people who maybe struggle to find that ability to be able to do both things at once, right? Like maybe they want to, like you have these amazing short videos on your YouTube, which we'll point people to inside the show notes, but they're just like so great because they're so manageable for people to do and they're so easy to do. But I know that sometimes people feel so like paralyzed by the weight of everything that it's even hard to do something like that. How do you teach people to balance feeling the weight of the whole world or even their personal lives, kind of like how you were managing all of those things at once yourself too? How do you manage the weight of that and bring it into the room with you and tell yourself it's okay, not feel that shame and guilt around it? Do you have any?
Of course, I've got tips. Of course, I've got tips. The first thing I want to lead with is it's hard. And I think sometimes, almost all the time, the fitness industry does not recognize that it's hard. even if the hard part is not the desire to go to the gym or to go for a run or whatever, people are money poor and time poor and energy poor. Like, people are working 3 jobs, people are caregivers, people are parents, people have chronic conditions where they don't know what their body's going to feel like day to day. Never mind the fact that fitness spaces are not built to be welcoming to anyone but the very privileged. So I think sometimes just hearing like, yeah, this is hard. And it's not hard because you're bad at it or weak or deficient in some way. It's hard because it's hard. And that also means that it's worth doing, right? If it was easy, why would you bother practicing it? And it's all a practice. It's not like you're going to show up on one perfect day and do it perfectly, and then you're done with taking care of yourself until the end of time. It's a practice. And when you practice anything, 10% of your days are phenomenal, and you feel like you really dug in and made progress, and you feel like you're on top of the world. And 10% of your days are just really shitty. And you're like, damn, why did I even show up today? I can't do anything. I'm a bad little worm person. And then 80% of your days are like, yeah, okay, I did it. And I took this big pile of dirt, and I took my little plastic spoon, and I moved 1 spoonful of dirt over here across the room. And I'm going to have to do it again tomorrow. But like, eventually that pile is going to look a little smaller, right? So I think the biggest thing, honestly, not to be like, mindset, it's all about mindset. I hear when my inner gym bro comes out. But moving our body is good for us, period. Mm-hmm. Even if that means, like, for some people that's running a marathon, for some people that's standing up off of the couch. And I want to make sure that people can do things like walk around the block or pick up their kid or carry bags in from their car or get up and down the stairs as long as possible. That is my goal. If your goal is to lift 10 times your body weight or to run a marathon, then that's amazing. And I'll give you tips for how to do that too. But my goal is to keep people as healthy as possible, as long as possible. And, you know, if you have goals that are vastly different from that, if you have aesthetic goals or you have superhuman fitness goals, maybe I'm not the trainer for you. But when we're talking about longevity, when we're talking about sustainability, when we're talking about general health and quality of life, we have this picture in our heads of what fitness looks like. We don't necessarily know what fitness feels like when it fits into our everyday. And oftentimes it's just a mental switch of, I like to imagine a light switch, like an on-off switch. If we screw that out of the wall and we replace it with a dimmer switch. So it's not, oh, I'm sitting on the couch all day today and I feel like garbage and I'm going to keep telling myself I'm garbage, versus I got up at 4 a.m. and I went to the gym and it was still dark outside. I was there for 2 hours and I came home and I ate my greens powder, chia seed, sunshine juice, whatever. Like, there are a whole, when we change it to the dimmer switch and we change it to a spectrum, a scale, whatever you want to call it, there are a whole host of options. And people don't feel empowered to give themselves options. People don't feel empowered to say, okay, if all I can manage today with my energy level, with all my meetings and obligations and things I have to do, with, you know, how good and pain-free and mobile my body feels, if all I can manage today is to get down on the floor and stretch for 5 minutes, or to go outside and take a walk, or I'm going to go to the gym and that was hard enough to get myself there, and I'm going to do my warm up and I'm going to do 1 set and then I'm going to go, this doesn't feel good, and I'm going to leave. You have to have, I think I'm borrowing this from my friend Tally Rye. I'm not sure that she was the one who originated this phrase, but I always hear her say it. It's all about like unconditional permission to rest, which especially in America, we think like, no, we're just lazy and we don't have discipline, and that's the problem. I think the problem is that we're holding ourselves to an unachievable standard. And if we go, hey, what I can do today is good enough, 9 times out of 10, we're going to actually do it. If we're not already beating ourselves up about not being able to do the perfect, ideal, really challenging version of what we imagine fitness to be aesthetically, if we can walk that back and say, how can I help myself out today? How can I be a good babysitter to myself? How can I say, we got 10 minutes worth of energy to move, let's do it. And if it doesn't feel good, then I'll sit down and I trust myself that I will quit and I will not, you know, double back and beat myself up about it. Like, if you can make that mindset shift, you're going to find a lot more times to fit a little bit of movement into your life, because it's not about how it looks. It's about how it makes you feel. And that's the thing that we discount.
I think this is really something that can be applied to a lot of things, not necessarily just fitness. If you're thinking about all that you're doing and all the places where you're telling yourself you're not enough, if you think about it like that dimmer switch and on that sliding scale and on that spectrum, like what you said, it doesn't have to be the duality of all or nothing or one extreme to the other. And as someone who has loved to live in extremes,
it's so attractive, isn't it?
So yes, and it's so hard to say wherever I'm at on this dimmer switch is, if I know I'm doing my best today, that is the best that I can do.
Nothing really bad happens to you if you did a little less than you were capable of, right? Like you're not gonna get a C- for the day. Yeah. Like if you walked for 20 minutes and you maybe could have done some sprints in there, like nothing bad happens. You still went on a walk, right? And that's the part that we get all twisty in our brains about when like, it's just moving our bodies. It's not that deep. It's not that serious.
Yeah. I love that. Do you have any routines that you do kind of every day that you bring yourself back to, like at your very base? For instance, when I wake up in the morning, I get myself an iced coffee. This is something that I started after my divorce because I was like, I deserve an iced coffee, damn it, every single day.
Congrats on your divorce.
Thank you.
And congrats on your iced coffee.
Thank you. Get myself an iced coffee, and then I go to my favorite park. It's like called the Peace Park, and because peace was definitely a part of my mantra for this next journey of my life. And so I would walk around for 20 minutes. I'd say at least 20 minutes. So it's funny that you said a 20-minute walk. I'll walk for 20 minutes. And then I journal and I meditate in my car. So I probably look like a freaking weirdo sitting in my car with my eyes closed. But at least I am getting outside no matter what the weather. I'm drinking my iced coffee, which makes me happy. That's the thing that gets me out the door, is thinking about the iced coffee. The other thing comes next, and kind of habit stacked that a little bit. But that tiny routine that probably takes me, I could do it, if I did it fast, it takes me 30 minutes. If I do it slow, it takes me like an hour. And that staying true to that tiny little simple routine every single day has saved me over the last 2 years. Just absolutely saved me. And I wonder if you have any simple, like at your very baseline, you always do this to keep yourself feeling that kind of healthy atmosphere within your own body and within your own self, and while building a business.
Yeah, I love that. Mine looks very similar. I love the idea of routines, like having a morning routine and a nighttime routine and like an afternoon break routine. And I'm shit at keeping up with them. So bad at it. One of the coaching certifications that I've done referred to those things as non-negotiables, which I really like. Like, you know, even if you're not a routine person, you probably brush your teeth every night before bed. So that's a non-negotiable. So what can you add into that sort of mental level of, this is something I have to do to just maintain myself. This is baseline. Mine's also walks, getting outside, into nature as much as possible. I'm very, very lucky to live in a nice, quiet part of Manhattan for the most part. I'm about a 10-minute walk from Central Park, which some days I'll get up and I won't want to do my walk and I'll be like, trudging. And then I'll be like, hey, look alive. You're walking to Central Park. What is wrong with you? Like, you are one of the luckiest people in the entire world to not work a 9 to 5 and be close to Central Park. Shut up. Which we're also working on how I speak to myself. So maybe that's revealing. But
I'm not going to yell at you. I barely know you.
But
like, be nice.
I notice such a palpable difference when I do get outside, again, rain or shine. And I honestly, like, there are so many proven benefits to seeing the sun, especially in the morning, in terms of resetting your circadian rhythm and the way your brain works and all these things that I'm not smart enough to articulate. But I also think part of that is just, well, it's twofold. I think number one is getting out of my apartment where I work all day in front of my precious screens, just to remind myself that, like, the world is much bigger than my apartment. The world is much bigger than my laptop. it does put everything into perspective, that it's just not that deep. The world is bigger than me and my brain, right? And then number two, to do something that my brain tells me is selfish right away, early in the morning, to be like, nope, the first thing is me first. Because, you know, not that we need this mental shift, but if I don't do that, I'm not going to be effective for anyone else during the whole day. I'm not going to be at my best when I'm training. I'm not going to have the clarity of mind to take my meetings or get on the internet and do my little fitness preaching or anything. I'm going to be a nightmare to my partner when he comes home. Like you know, being selfish is not so selfish. You need to take care of yourself because no one else can. But I do think that I'm building that sort of neural pathway of being like, me first, right away, even when it's inconvenient, even when it feels like, well, I could just sit down and get into my emails. So my morning walks are a big one. And I also try to drink a big thing of water first thing, just regular ass water. I fill it up at night. So then it's like, oh, I didn't do this. This is a gift from past Laura and it's just here. And but
it's ready for me.
Yeah, I have not been good about like, ideally I'm eating breakfast before I have my coffee because then it doesn't hit my system as much. It doesn't send my anxiety spinning, but I haven't been able to keep up with that. So the water is like the one thing we could accomplish, but it's still a thing, right?
No, it is. And I think it's great to point out that perfection isn't the destination, you know? Yeah. And everyone has their own things that they don't like, no matter how many people say like, oh yeah, I do this morning routine every day without fail, no matter what. Everyone has things that they let slide. Everyone has things that they don't get to do. And I notice myself when I let myself slide on those non-negotiables, I also have a hard time asking for help. And when I let myself slide on those things, just everything feels like I haven't supported my own needs, no matter what. Yeah. Even if people are doing their best, even if I'm doing my best, it seems like I don't know how to ask for what I need if I don't start the day by supporting myself with what I need.
Yeah. And I think also recognizing, just like with fitness, what you need every day changes. Mm-hmm. Like my walks a couple of months ago, I used to listen to the same news podcast and I'd take the same route and it would be like a 30-minute walk and that was great. Mm-hmm. But then I fell off of that habit because 30 minutes was too long. I couldn't fit it in and I didn't want to listen to a depressing news podcast and whatever. And so I stopped doing my walks instead of going, hey, you can listen to whatever you want. You can walk wherever you want. And mm-hmm. I catch myself in those patterns. And part of that is so fun to work in like a fitness coaching wellness business mm-hmm. to notice where these patterns pop up in my own life and where I need to keep like, what's this? Like whack-a-moling them down. You know what I mean? It always pops up somewhere else.
Yeah.
And just be willing to, again, work with that dimmer switch and be like, if I keep my routine so strict and I never audit it and I never check in with what I actually need or want, then it is just becoming work. And then if I'm letting my work expand into these precious few hours of my personal life, then I'm going to need more time to recharge because that's not actually serving me. I'm serving it. And so that's when I end up scrolling on TikTok until 2 a.m. because I feel like I haven't actually had any time to let my brain rest during the day. Yeah. So learning how to be less rigid, even when it's something that felt like a good idea at the time, even if it's something that worked for me at one point, being willing to walk away from things or change things.
Adapt.
Adapt. Let the booster rockets fall away.
Yeah,
you know?
Just radical acceptance for yourself, wherever you're at. Yeah, that's something hard, I've learned a lot. This is a story for another time, but I've learned a lot about just acceptance and how people, seeing other like super healthy couples even accept each other, or seeing friends accept each other and realizing like, oh, certain things in my life were I wasn't radically accepted, and that's why I always feel this need to like present myself as a perfect entrepreneur or as somebody who has never made a mistake, or hold myself to this perfectionistic standard in my business, and like how it just kind of builds into every single facet of your life. So acceptance for who you are and wherever you're at the time. It's huge.
Yeah. And also like all of these standards that we hold ourselves to are made up.
They're made up.
Like when you look, not to get out my bulletin board and my red yarn and be like, it goes all the way to the top.
Yeah.
But thinking about like how the ideas of like professionalism and business etiquette come from things like capitalism and white supremacy. And like, when you look at the bigger structures that it feels like, oh, I'm comparing myself, my tiny business of one to how things work at Google. It's like, well, you don't know that things are working there. Like we're modeling this behavior that's based on
something
kind
made
of
up.
Inhumane standards.
Yeah.
And so not to get my tinfoil cap out, but like, we're allowed to question things. We're allowed to say like, how do I want my business to run? If it is dependent on me and me doing my best work, then how do I keep myself in a place where I can do my best work? And that's freaking hard to do, because that's like, my therapist says that's metacognition and I'm really good at it, but it's also debilitating. Like, you know, it's just going to take some time to figure out, I think, and trying to accept that not only is it going to take time, but I'm going to need to give it time. That's, whew.
Yeah, give it time. Oh gosh, time. Okay, my last question for you, something I love to ask every single person, because we are running out of time and I could talk to you. I think we could deep dive any of these topics for hours, but the thing that I want to ask you is if you could bust any myth about either your industry or even anything in your life, anything at all, what myth would you bust for us?
Oh, this is so hard. And you warned me and I'm still not prepared. I feel like I spend a lot of time like busting fitness myths and stuff. So if that's something that you're interested in, like there's lots of it on my page. The one I've been talking a lot about recently is cycle syncing.
Ooh.
Not insofar as listening to your body and adapting to your body, but in the way the internet has sunk its teeth into the concept of like syncing with the menstrual cycle and taking it in the direction of like, here are these Pinterest graphics where they prescribe to you which workout you're going to do in which week. And if you don't do that, then your uterus is going to burst open and you'll die because you're just a tiny, fragile menstruating person. Like the reality is like the literature is not there to back it. And also the people who need to pay attention to supporting themselves through their menstrual cycle are people with conditions where they don't have a regular menstrual cycle, like PCOS, like endometriosis, whatever. Like people who actually might need extra support are not being supported by this like gobbledygook that's being spun out into the internet. It's the new gut health. It's the new, here's a, very thin woman living in a fancy $5,000 a month apartment downtown telling you that this one specific juice fixed her whole life and helped her lose 900 pounds. Like it's marketing, but that's the one I've seen that's most pernicious. And again, I think it comes from a good place of being like, hey, I've never had support for this thing in my life ever. And we are, it's new in the literature and we are kind of an underserved population, yada, yada, yada. But most fitness trends boil down to listen to your body and adapt accordingly. So
listen to your body and adapt accordingly. I think that is such a good theme for this episode and everything that we've talked about. Yes. Thank you so much for being on the Real Personal Branding Podcast, Laura. This was so much fun. Thank you
so much for having me. I had such a great time talking to you. Any excuse to run my mouth, but this really was... I feel like I got to vent to a buddy about like the things I'd be worried about all day anyway. So thank you for...
I feel the same way. It was one of those conversations where I'm like looking back now, I'm like, what was I saying during that part? Why did I even bring that up? All right, thank you. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Real Personal Branding Podcast with Laura Girard and me, Lauren B. Davis. What did you think? I would love to hear from you. Did you like this episode? Let me know so I can continue bringing you content like this You can find me on Instagram, LinkedIn as L Davis Creative, practically everywhere as L Davis Creative. Let's have a conversation about it. Let's be real friends. And tell Laura too. Find her on Instagram. I know she would like that. I know she would appreciate it. And if you love learning about personal branding, feel free to join me in my free Facebook group called Personal Branding and Social Media for Entrepreneurs. And if you related to a lot of what Laura and I spoke about today, you might be interested in this retreat I'm co-hosting with Molly Gershom this January. You deserve the time and the tools to get some clarity, but making that space for yourself is not always easy. And that is why Molly and I invite you to just hit pause for a couple of days. Join us for this 2.5 day really retreat in an inclusive and an uplifting experience for women entrepreneurs to get real about the possibilities and challenges of building your business and leading your life with both practical tools and the space to fully express yourself. We are going to be digging deep. We invite you to dig deep within yourself, discover what's holding you back, and really take those next steps in creating the business and life that you want. This retreat is going to be happening January 26th and 27th. There's an optional mixer the day before on the 25th, before it all starts, where we kind of get to know each other. We definitely recommend coming for that. This is taking place in the Midwest, in St. Louis. We purposely chose the Midwest on purpose because so many retreats are either on the East Coast or the West Coast. And we were like, hey, you know what? We want some middle ground here. We want some Midwest territory here. So we are hosting this retreat in the Midwest. We would love to see you there. I will drop the link in the show notes for you. Friends, that wraps up this episode. Thank you for tuning in to the Real Personal Branding Podcast. I can't wait to talk to you next time.